Well, this is the first year that Allie and I have been in California, that we are going to be traveling back to Oklahoma for Christmas time. We'll be leaving a week from Monday, and we'll actually be in Oklahoma on Christmas Day, which has presented a little bit of challenges with Santa Claus coming to visit us. Because we will be in Oklahoma, we don't want to pay to bring things back that Santa brought to the kids. So we have had to discuss about how we're going to arrange this. And the options are either that we arrange with Santa to come visit early before we go and their kids get to have an early Christmas, or we arrange for Santa to come afterwards. Now you know which one we chose, don't you? Santa's coming early. And we told ourselves that it was because we didn't want our kids to have to wait and have Christmas after Christmas Day. But as I started to think more yesterday and today, I realized that our kids, they don't know what day it is. So this is not about their inability to be patient, but more about their parents' ability to be patient. And it's during this season that I think I become more aware of our inability to wait. We do not like to wait. I mean, think about how you go through so many things about your life. Whenever you go into the grocery store and you have to check out, you start sizing up the lines, don't you? And not only do you count how many people are in the line, you start counting how many items they have in their bags, especially if you are in the express lane. And you are counting to make sure that they have less than 20 items and they're in the express lane. And then we're really bad because once we're through, we look back at the other options that we had to know if we made the right choice. And we leave the grocery store and we go and get to a stoplight, and you start to try and decide, if there's two lanes going this way, which one am I going to get in? And if there's two cars, equal number of cars, you start sizing up the cars, the make and model of that car, to determine which one is going to get off fastest. Okay, we do not like to wait. And yet, we're stuck waiting. We're stuck in this Advent time between comings. He has come, and yet He is coming, and we are stuck with waiting. And the problem is that we don't wait well. Whenever we have to wait, we often make poor decisions. You remember the story of a man named Jacob? He had a twin brother named Esau, and Jacob did not like to wait. Because Esau was going to be born first, you remember he grabs the heel and he's just kind of pulling out of the womb. He wants to get out first. And after he's born, he continues to live his life that way. And so there was the time in Genesis chapter 27 when Jacob finally decided that he was done waiting. And so he had, together with his mom, crafted this plan in which he was going to steal the inheritance from his brother. That would have been his eventually if lifespans kind of worked out the way they're supposed to be. He would have gotten what was left. But he didn't want to wait. And so the time came for Isaac to begin to dole out the inheritance, dole out the blessings on to his two sons. And he calls Esau, the oldest, in, and he tells him, what I want you to do is I want you to go out and I want you to go hunting. I want you to kill something, bring it in and cook it for me, and then I'll bless you. The mother hears of this plan and goes and gets Jacob says, Jacob, I'm going to cook something first before Esau has a chance to hunt anything and bring it back. And I want you to take it in there to him. And now is your chance. You can have everything you want now. In order to pull off this plan, because there was a strong difference between Jacob and Esau physically. Jacob was an inside boy. He didn't smell like the wild. He wasn't big and muscular. He was not hairy. He was very smooth. Esau apparently could have applied for a Geico commercial as one of the cavemen, because the plan was that we're going to skin a lamb, and the amount of hair that is on a lamb would have been equivalent to deceive Isaac, who is blind now, that feels like Esau. Now that was one hairy guy. And the plan works. In this inability to wait, Jacob then started to make decisions that were incredibly selfish. He made decisions that were good for him right now. And this is human nature. That out of our inability to wait, we make decisions that are good for us now and will be bad for us later. That's why you have the credit card debt that you do. It's because you started to make decisions that were good for you now. They sold you this lie that you can have something now and your future self will be okay with paying for it. That's why we have the weight issues that we do now, is because we make this decision in the moment and it's good for us now, not thinking that it's going to be bad for us later. This is why you have storage units. Or you have those bags that are hidden in your closet whenever somebody's coming over very quickly and you just throw everything in the bag and you throw it in the closet because you tell yourself you'll get to it later. You're making a decision that's good for you now and it will be bad for you later. Because there's going to be some important paper that got shuffled in all of that, and in the emergency, whenever you need that paper, you can't find it. Because you made a decision out of your inability to wait that's good for you now, that will be bad for you later. And Jacob does this. And whenever you start to make decisions that are good for you alone, you will find that your community starts to shrink. Because if I make a decision that's good for me, it's not necessarily going to be good for you or you. And so now you're no longer a part of my community. And on top of that, I become incredibly fearful of everyone that is not a part of my community because I have wronged all of these people. And what is fascinating is you can go back through the history of wars and study how wars take place. And most of the time, it is things that has taken place generations beforehand. Where, as America, we wronged somebody, we made a decision that was good for us now, but wasn't necessarily good for us later. And then later it comes back to haunt us. And our community just keeps shrinking and shrinking and shrinking and shrinking. And we have reached a point in our generation in which, for many of us, our community is our household. That we don't know our neighbors anymore. I'm fascinated whenever I come home and I have a rent house, and so the owner of the home provides a gardener, some landscaping care. And I'm fascinated every time I come home and they're working and they have these kind of lazy packs on called leaf blowers. And they're blowing the leaves. And you know where they're blowing them? They're not blowing them to pick them up. They're blowing them out in the street or into my neighbor's yard. Because they're not a part of this community. They're not a part of this problem. And so your community all of a sudden becomes very isolated. And now you become fearful to talk to them because you blew leaves over in their yard. And you've wronged them. So now they're going to get you back. This is where Jacob is. He has wronged his brother, and now his community is down to one: himself. Because all of his life, he has been taking advantage of people and positions, situations that come up in life. He has been taking advantage of them for the good of now at the cost of the future. And his community has shrunk down to himself, and he has to go on the run. And there's this incredible story that you find in Genesis chapter 28. Verse 10. Jacob left Beersheba and set out for Haran. When he reached a certain place, he stopped for the night because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones there, he put it under his head and lay down to sleep. He had a dream in which he saw a stairway resting on the earth with its top reaching to heaven, and the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. There above it stood the Lord, and he said, I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham and the God of Isaac. I will give you and your descendants the land on which you are lying. Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out to the west and to the east, to the north and to the south. All peoples on earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. I am with you and will watch over you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. Now that is a fascinating dream. For a man that is on the run from everybody and everything in his life, he is not running to anything. He is running from everything. And now all of a sudden he has a dream that God is on his side. This is the first time that God shows up in the story of Jacob. God is never mentioned in Jacob. We don't know what kind of relationship Jacob has at all with God. Based on the way that Jacob is living, I think we kind of have to call into question how he views God and what his relationship is with God. He's on the run from everything, living in fear. The famed jazz musician Louis Armstrong told the story of growing up in Louisiana, and his mother forced him to go down to the nearby water supply to bring buckets of water into the house. That was a part of his chores. And there was one day that he came back and didn't have any water. And of course, the first question his mom asks whenever she sees him is where's the water? And he told his mother that he didn't get any water because there was a crocodile down at the watering hole. And his mom looked at him and told him to go back down to the water hole and get the water because that crocodile is just as scared of him as he is of the crocodile. And Louis looked at his mama as a young boy and said, Mama, if that crocodile is as scared of me as I am of it, that water isn't fit for us to drink. I don't know about you, but I find it very easy to live my life that way. To live my life out of a sense of fear. Because there's always another shooting. It was just a few Christmases ago that the greatest, the largest mass shooting took place near Christmas time as well in Newtown, Connecticut. There's always another earthquake. There's always another tsunami. There's always another wildfire. There's always something else that is out of our control, that threatens our sense of security. And it's very easy for me to live out of this anxiety, this fear, and to just want to bring my community smaller and smaller and smaller. But Advent tells us a different story. Advent tells us a story of hope. And I really struggle with whether or not to use that word, because most of us, we think of hope in the terms of either a last resort. You know, that you've done all the work that is needed and for the job interview, and you just kind of go into it and it's out of your control. I hope that it goes good. It's just kind of this last resort. Or we look at it as a fate or luck or chance. That this world is just kind of spiraling out of it, and it's kind of random and chaotic, and sometimes things fall in your favor and sometimes you don't, so you hope that things go well. But the hope of Advent does not deny the present reality. Whenever God shows up to Jacob, He doesn't look down and say, "Oh, I got the wrong house. I didn't mean to come to this guy because this guy is a swindler. This guy is a thief. This guy is a crook. I meant to go down the street." Do you remember the context in which the first Advent takes place? We sing of Silent Night, Holy Night, but that is a farce. It was not a silent night. It was not a holy night. If you believe that, you have never been in a delivery room. There is nothing calm. There is nothing silent about that moment. It is filled with agony. It is filled with pain. On top of that, do you remember what happens? You have the wise men coming from the east, and they go to the king first and say, "We've heard that there is a new king that's born." And this king obviously doesn't like the threat, and so what does he do? Matthew chapter 2. Verse 16, when Herod realized that he had been outwitted by the Magi because they didn't come back to him and report where the new king was born, he was furious. And he gave orders to kill all the boys in Bethlehem and its vicinity who were 2 years old and under, in accordance with the time he had learned from the Magi. Then what was said through the prophet Jeremiah was fulfilled. A voice is heard in Ramah, weeping and great mourning. Rachel weeping for her children and refusing to be comforted because they are no more. Religion has long been said to be the opiate of the masses. That it is the way of those who are abused, those who life has not gone their way, where they can just kind of duck their head in the sand and have this hope. But Advent doesn't offer us that hope. The hope that Advent brings doesn't deny the present reality. Jesus is born in death and blood and weeping and crying. That is the scene of the first coming. But what hope does do is hope defines reality by who is present. So Jacob has the dream, sees God and a gateway to heaven. And then, verse 16, when Jacob awoke from his sleep, he thought, surely the Lord is in this place, and I was not aware of it. And from this point on, Jacob's life begins to take a new direction, a new shape. Immediately after this, he still tries to kind of control God, and he says, God, if you'll really do what you said you're going to do, then I'll follow you. So he's still trying to manipulate life. But over time, Jacob begins to experience the presence of God in spite of his wickedness, in spite of his brokenness, in spite of his failings. God has somehow chosen Jacob. And then Jacob begins to define reality by who is present. He no longer denies that he has done wicked things. He no longer denies the brokenness of the world, but he begins to define it because God is in this place. This place that he thought was going to be the end of him, that he was fleeing just simply for his life, he gets there and he finds that God is already there. Maybe, just maybe, part of what Jacob is running from is from God. I say that because I have met a number of people that were on the run. They were on the run because they had grown up with an idea of God as this harsh judge. And they live in constant anxiety that they are somehow going to offend God, or that the moment that they die, that they will die before they have a chance to confess of a certain sin that they have committed. And so there's this constant anxiety that when the judgment comes, they're going to be on the wrong side of the line. Because God is cruel. He's just waiting for you to step out of line. He's going to bring the hammer down. And Jacob experiences a different kind of God. Jacob experiences a God that doesn't wait for him to pursue God, but God is pursuing him. And I can't help but wonder if there's someone here this morning that you are living life that way. That maybe you have even started to throw your hands up whenever it comes to religion or faith in God. And it's not because you can in any way really deny that God exists, but it is out of this fear that you can never be good enough, you can never please God. And so this is the first time you've been at church since last Christmas. Maybe this is the first time that you've been in the doors of a church building in a long time, and you have been running from everything, from everybody, including God. And what I want you to hear this morning is that God is already there. Wherever you are. We have this false notion that we come into this place and we meet God here. And God isn't out in the world. God doesn't have anything to do with our jobs, with our plumbing, with whatever it is that we do. But if you would just open your eyes to see, God's already there. Maybe the reason that God had to speak to Jacob in a dream is because that's the only way that God could get his attention. Because God is a God who is present. I mean, this is what Advent is about. When Jesus was born, Matthew chapter 1, we are told that he was to be given the name Emmanuel, which means God with us. Not God with us if we get right. Not God with us if we get all of our business in order. But God is with us. Whenever the gospel ends in Matthew chapter 28, Jesus says, I am going to be with you till the end of the age. The gospel begins with God is with us, and it ends with God is with us. And that shapes everything. That is what hope is, church. That somehow, mysteriously, God is with us, and that is good news. Monty Cox is a professor at Harding University, and he tells a story of a friend of his that had just welcomed a new child into their family. The wife had just given birth 6 months earlier. They also were foster care parents in Illinois, where they lived. And that meant that on any given day, they could receive a phone call from somebody that is needing a child that's needing a home. And it happened to them on this day. The young girl came in, and it was obvious that she had experienced some kind of hell in her life, because she immediately, upon entering in the house, went and hid underneath the bed and refused to come out. And these foster parents didn't know what to do until the mother has this idea. She takes their newborn child, crawls under the bed, and slides that baby under the bed. As a way of showing this young girl, in a way that only she could understand, that it's safe here. That it's not going to be like all the other places that she has been. That here, there's hope. And it's not a last resort, it's not a luck of the draw, but it is because of who is present. And that is a powerful parable of the gospel, a powerful parable of Advent. That in this strange way, God has made himself weak and entered into the form of a child and crawled under the bed with us and said, I'm here. I am with you. And you didn't even know it. That, church, is hope. That is the hope that the coming of Christ calls us into and calls us to live out of. To then go out into the world and not be crippled by our fear of the evil that is going on in this world, but to recognize that God is present and we didn't even know it. Every time one of these acts of wickedness happen, there are stories that come out where you see God working, where you see victims coming up and calling for the forgiveness of those that are the offenders. You see those that have lost their loved ones, they go and befriend the offenders' families. In the darkness, the light shines its brightest. And hope defines the reality by who is present. Let's stand and worship together.